Crime Cafe, your podcasting source of great crime, suspense, and thriller writing. I'm your host, Debbi Mack. Before I bring on my guest, I'll just remind you that the Crime Cafe has 2 ebooks for sale, the 9-book box set and the short story anthology. You can find the buy links for both on my website, debbimack.com, under the Crime Cafe link. You can also get a free copy of either book if you become a Patreon supporter. You'll get that and much more if you support the podcast on Patreon, along with our eternal gratitude for doing so. But first, let me put in a good word for Blueberry Podcasting. I'm a Blueberry affiliate, but that's not the only reason I'm telling you this. I've been using Blueberry Podcasting as my hosting service for my podcast for years, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made. They give great customer service. You're in complete control of your own podcast. You can run it from your own website, and it just takes a lot of the work out of podcasting for me. I find for that reason that it's a company that I can get behind 100% and say, you should try this. Try Blueberry. It doesn't require a long-term contract, and it's just a great company, period. And it also has free technical support by email, video, and phone. So you can get a human being there. Isn't that nice? Hi, everyone. My guest today is both a professional paleontologist and a novelist. He writes the Henry Przewalski. Is that correct, I hope? Przewalski?
Well,
Private Eye
yeah,
novels?
literally, it reads as Przewalski, but it's
Przewalski.
actually a Russian-Polish name,
Huh.
named for the discoverer of Przewalski's horse, that small kind of dwarfish horse that lives wild on the Asian steppes. So it's pronounced in the Russian sense, Przewalski.
Przewalski. Got
Correct.
it. All right. I'll try to remember that.
All right.
It's my pleasure to have him with me today. It's Leonard Krystalka, who goes by Kris, like
Correct.
Kris Kristofferson. May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace. A
Yeah,
terrific artist,
indeed.
a
Yeah,
wonderful artist.
he was. Yeah. I want to thank you for being here so much. It's good to have you on. Tell us about Harry Swazolski. I almost screwed that up again. Um, how much did you draw from your own experiences in creating him?
A great deal. I named Harry Przewalski as a homage to um, the study of the life of the past and the study of present biodiversity. So Przewalski's horse is this miniature horse that roams wild on the steppes of Asia. It was almost became extinct by overhunting. And in World War II, the German soldiers ate what is reputed to be some of the last Przewalski's horses in a zoo in Poland. But enough were saved to repopulate the wild steppes of Asia.
Interesting. Did you choose that name deliberately?
I did. I chose it deliberately, although it's hard to pronounce, and as a homage to uh, the paleontological studies of the evolutionary history of the life on Earth, the 3 billion year history of life on Earth.
That is so cool. Um, how many books do you have in the series, and how many do you plan to write? Or do you have a plan for the series?
Um, there are 4 books now in the Harry Przewalski series. There's The Bonefield, Death Spoke, The Camel Driver, and the newest one just published this year called Native Blood. I have a 5th novel, which is not in that series. It's a historical fiction of a murder that occurred in Lawrence, Kansas in 1871. A doctor accused of murdering his patient because he was having an affair with a patient's wife. Um, the trial, the doctor was arrested, and the resulting trial was equivalent to, imagine the O.J. Simpson trial in 1871 in Kansas. You have sex, you have murder, you have adultery. Um, it attracted every single reporters of every single newspaper in the country, from San Francisco, from Chicago, from St. Louis, from New York, Washington, Detroit, and so forth. This is 1871 Kansas. It's only what, 6 years after the civil end of the Civil War. So the trial was a national sensation. And one of the Lawrence women becomes the heroine. She talks the editor of one of the Lawrence newspapers into hiring her as the first woman correspondent west of the Mississippi. She covers the trial and solves the murder.
Wow.
She also fights for women's rights. She's one of the, she fights for suffrage for women and blacks. Um, yeah, she's quite a woman.
And which book is this again?
This is called The Body on the Bed. I could hold it up for viewers to see.
That's very cool. I noticed that book was outside the series,
Yeah,
and
it
I
is.
was I
And
was
I'm
intrigued by
writing
it.
I'm writing the sequel to that now. It's called The Body on the Bricks. Also, she is the heroine of that book as well. But your original question was about the Przewalski series, of which there are now four, and yes, there may well be a fifth.
Fantastic. Do you see yourself ending the series in a particular way, or do you just think you're going to keep writing them?
Uh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I do see myself ending the Przewalski series um, in a way that does poetic justice to Harry's character, how he thinks, how he acts, and when he would take off his gun and put it away somewhere and say, "I'm going to do something else."
Yeah. So hanging up the guns and retiring at some point.
Correct.
In what ways does your protagonist differ from you?
Ah. Well, Harry is not me. Of course, as with any writer, there are parts of you that you cannot help but insert into characters. Experience, emotions, the way one thinks, senses of humor, senses of tragedy. Um, uh, in all of those ways, yes, there are parts of Harry that come from my life and my experience. Um, but there's a great deal to Harry that isn't like me.
Hmm.
So Harry, for example, Harry was a student of paleontology, um, and quit when his fiance, who was a social worker, was brutally raped and murdered by a social misfit. He left his studies. He went to volunteer for a war in Iraq. He came back with a gun and a license to detect. That's not,
Hmm. So he's a veteran.
yes.
Wow. Yeah, that'll have an effect on you.
And he uses his skills that he learned as thinking as a paleontologist about those scarce clues about a bone here, a tooth there, a skull there, to piece together the evolution of life on Earth, where he uses those skills of piecing together clues from different spheres to solve murder mysteries, and which are all wrapped inside science intrigues as well.
Hmm.
So, for example, in the bone field, uh, is the bone field investigates a paleontologist who was murdered for scientific glory, for fame, for one of the fault lines in the human condition that I like to write about. I think the job of every novelist is to explore the fault lines in the human condition. And the mystery genre, the hard-boiled mystery genre, is a perfect vehicle for exploring those fault lines. Uh, so, um, in the Bone Field, I quote John Wolcott, a Scottish satirist, who wrote, "The rage for fame infects great and small. Better be damned than mentioned not at all." And that infects a great deal of science intrigues. So there's a great deal of paleontological intrigue, geological intrigue, and of course murder and betrayal in the bone field. In the second book, in Deathspoke, the scientific intrigue is the archaeology of prehistoric art. Who painted the spectacular bison and deer and horses and mammoths in the caves of France 12,000 to 34,000 years ago? And why didn't they paint in those caves? Why didn't they paint the outside environment, sky, clouds, trees, grass, water, lakes, streams? There is an answer to that, which you will not hear in archaeology class, but if your audience wants to read Deathspoke, they'll find out the answer to that question.
Fascinating. That really is fascinating. I'm intrigued by the science here. How much scientific detail do you include in your books?
A great deal, but the the trick in 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 writing the scientific parts are um, interweaving the murder story, the detective story, with the
Hmm.
scientific mystery, so that the two are inseparable and both of them are page turners,
Exactly. Yeah.
so that one complements the other. So in what I just mentioned about the novel Deathspoke, the um, solution to the mystery of who were the artists and why did they paint art in the deepest recesses of the caves, and why only those four animals in almost 99% of the caves. That mystery is interwoven with solving the murder mystery.
That is really cool. That is so cool. Have you ever thought of writing a mystery with dinosaur bones for kids?
That's a really good question. Um, I used to I used to make up stories for my kids and not read it, but relate it at bedtime, and they
Huh.
loved those stories. I wish I'd written them down, but and they did have dinosaurs. Yes,
Oh my gosh, because kids seem to love dinosaurs, and I
yes,
thought
they do.
right
Yeah,
away that you'd be a natural at telling that kind of story.
right, right.
Wow. Um, do you work full time as a paleontologist?
I did work full time as a paleontologist. I don't anymore. I go into the field once in a while, still excavating dinosaurs and other fossils in Montana. Uh, but I am not a professional paleontologist any longer in terms of publishing in the field, writing scientific articles, and so forth. I've switched from that to writing about paleontology and archaeology, especially uh,
Hmm,
in my mystery novels.
that's really interesting and cool. What kind of writing schedule do you keep?
I don't. And I wish I was disciplined enough to keep a writing schedule. Then I would finish a novel in 6 months or a year rather than take 2 years to write a novel. Um, uh, it's easy to procrastinate. It's easy to do other things that one enjoys. Reading. I'm an avid cyclist, so I do a great deal of cycling that takes a great deal of time. I like to
Hmm.
go and camp and so on.
That's great. That's wonderful, actually. What was it that drew you to the field of paleontology?
Say that again.
What was it that drew you to the field of paleontology?
Um, it's a good question. There are two passions made me a paleontologist. First was the passion of ideas. And in many ways, my novels are about those ideas. Paleontology asks ultimate questions. Um, what triggered the myriad explosions and extinctions of life on the planet during the past 3 billion years? That's an ultimate question. Um, hundreds of millions of species came and went on land and in the waters, um, from the tiny one-celled algae all the way to the dinosaur that everybody knows, Tyrannosaurus Rex. So basal to that answer is the tree of life. And as a paleontologist, I try to decipher that 3 billion year tree of life on Earth. Um, the other, the other answer uh, was the passion of place. The Badlands, where the rocks preserve and erode out the answers to the ultimate questions that paleontology asks. It's only in the Badlands that you find all those fossils. And for
Hmm.
me, the Badlands are primeval. Those, canyons, stark, rubble-strewn, the buttes rising in stacked red layers of red and gray and blue, much like people would see in the Grand Canyon. It's as if the earth, every time you find a fossil, you can imagine that the earth itself has bled from the red rocks. As a city kid, I was born and raised in Montreal in Canada. So as a city kid, when I first saw the Badlands, I was seduced by their beauty. And for me, it was a beauty so terrible that it hurt the heart.
I know the feeling. Yeah. I'm originally from New York City, and then I moved to Fresno, California, and it was like, oh, look at this place.
Yeah, yeah,
No big tall buildings. I feel like I'm out in the open at last.
right, right.
Yeah, it's quite a almost a shock, almost a culture shock to go from that setting to Fresno, California. Um, what authors do you like to read, and what authors have inspired your writing?
That is a great question. Let's see. I actually have a list because I don't want to leave anybody out. So, um, who do I like to read? So I grew up on Rex Stout and his Nero Wolfe mysteries. I used to reread them every few years. The stories are entertaining. They're almost mannered. They're set in New York, where you're from. But what stayed with me when I read them was Rex Stout's craft as a writer, as a storyteller. I also read all of Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, James Cain. They introduced me to that streetwise, hard-boiled detective, the private eye, the simple, short, declarative sentence. Ernest Hemingway introduced me to that as well. The wisecrack. And it also revealed how the gritty alleys of Los Angeles and other cities are perfect settings to fester the strands of human rot and to tell the story of the gritty underbelly of human life and the human condition. This is why the detective story is so perfect. I continued reading, let's see, Ross MacDonald, James Crumley, whose prose is unmatched. Um, if for readers out there, the best dialogue, the absolute master of dialogue is Elmore Leonard. Uh,
Yes,
he,
boy.
he paints his characters, their plots, the emotions, their psyches. He paints it with their words, how they speak, their expressions, their syncopation. Um, when I
I,
read these authors, I find myself envious, saying, "Damn, I wish I'd written that sentence."
oh yeah.
Um, it's the same holds for, of course, Elmore Leonard is dead, but the same holds for current writers. Ian Rankin, Lawrence Block, James Lee Burke, James Elroy. Uh, Readers can't go wrong. If you're a aspiring detective writer, start with James Crumley, start with A Kiss Before Dying, and then go on.
Hmm. It's been ages since I've read that, and I have to go back and look at it again because,
Yeah,
boy, that name,
yeah.
James Crumley, I remember. And you,
In the Bonefield, I pay homage to him because I named the sheriff of a town in Wyoming after him. His name is Crumley.
oh, cool, very
Yeah,
cool. I love the way you said that the private eye novel, the hard-boiled detective novel, is the perfect type of book to show the fault lines in the human condition. I think fault lines in the human condition has to be one of my favorite phrases.
right.
That is
So,
so great.
so if I could elaborate on that,
Sure
uh,
thing.
uh, hold on a second. If I could elaborate on that, um, my novels are classified as, and we're talking about them as murder mysteries, archaeological thrillers, paleontological thrillers. And they fit the stereotype. There are murders committed, there are murders solved, there's a private detective, and so on. But the mystery classification is simplistic. For me,
Hmm.
and I'm saying this for all your readers, all your listeners, for me, the best works in the mystery genre, Raymond Chandler, Elmer Leonard, I've talked about them before, James Crumley, Dorothy L. Sayers. They're much more than whodunits. They explore the fault lines in the human condition. And the best ones are as good as the classics in literature. Mystery novels, private eye novels, they have the reputation of B literature. I disagree with that entirely. It's just like, Humphrey Bogart films used to be called B films, but now they're rated as just as classic as all the other classics.
Hmm.
So the best mystery private eye novels are they explore the same fault lines in the human condition as the classics in literature, the Book of Job, Shakespeare's Hamlet, Toni Morrison's Beloved, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. Those all made impressions on me. So, in the best mysteries, just like in the classics in literature, the characters are just as flawed, just as heroic. The relationships are just as conflicted. The seven deadly sins are just as deadly. And the stories expose the same gritty underbelly of life.
Yes. It seems like your books, it scientific part of it can even border a little on philosophy there,
Correct.
quite
Correct.
a bit actually.
Yes, there's quite a bit of philosophy in and I don't hesitate to kind of throw a couple of philosophical thoughts in. For example, I can read a small portion of the Bonefield where Harry likens geology to the human condition. He's standing in the Badlands and he's thinking, he's looking. Imagine standing in the over. Um, Uh, yeah, over the Badlands. Weathering was ceaseless, this endless war of attrition between earth and sun and wind and rain, the land trying to stay in equilibrium with the elements and failing. It was like the geology of a love affair, Harry thought, the silent abrasion of its intimate contours to a flat, monochromatic terrain. So, in many ways, our life, human relationships, are much like the Grand Canyon, exposed to the elements, being eroded grain by grain by grain, ultimately failing.
Ooh, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Have you ever thought about doing voice acting or audiobook reading?
I did record The Bone Field as an audiobook. It's available as it's the only one. No, I've also recorded The Body on the Bed, but it is not out yet.
A great voice.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's beautiful, beautiful writing too.
Thank you.
Um, what advice would you give to anyone who wants a writing career?
That too is a great question. I would say rule number one, take chances. Art and science, the writing, the crafting of a novel, that art, and the science of that art. Art and science are subversive storytelling. They're the risky search for uncomfortable truth. And that's what those novels should explore. Uncomfortable truth. Writing a novel isn't meant to be comfortable. I'm going to quote George Orwell. Good novels are written by people who are not frightened.
I love that.
And for me, what always happens to, I think of the novel as an unbridled horse, a horse you cannot control. The novel is the wagon, and the horse is pulling the wagon, and you're sitting on the wagon. It takes you, suddenly the horse goes down an alley that was unexpected, unexplored. Um, let let your writing violate the storyboard if you use one. You know, go off the storyboard. I don't use the storyboard. I let the horse and the wagon drag me where it does. Um, and those alleys, unexplored, are the most rewarding moments of writing.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
like many other authors would say, let let your voice emerge naturally, unforced. Don't try and imitate anybody else's voice. Don't worry about being off key. You can always put it back into key when you edit, but just let it flow. Be smart, be scrupulous, be forthright. Like Steinbeck said, the discipline of the written word punishes both stupidity and dishonesty. Be honest, don't be stupid. Do your research. Write what you know what you write. Immerse yourself in the research that goes into the novel. And when my advice and one I try and follow for every writer, um, make when you write your novel, make readers want to pause at every sentence or at most sentences and say to themselves, damn, I wish I'd written that sentence.
Hmm.
Because every elegant sentence is, for me, a novel's literary heaven. Because otherwise, as William Styron quipped, writing is hell.
Well, on that note, I just want to say thank you. And is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish up?
Uh, no, writing, the act of writing is uh, one of the most enjoyable and painful Writing is hell, but writing is also heaven bound.
I like to write, but I hate to write, but I love to have
Both.
written, as
Yes.
Dorothy Parker once put it. Well, I just want to thank you again for being here. It was great talking to you. I could talk to you for hours probably about this whole subject because
Thank you very much. Thank you for this podcast. I really appreciate it.
it's my pleasure, believe me. Um, So, everybody, if you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review if you would, on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're a regular listener, check out our Patreon page. My work is up there. I've got samples of my work, ad-free episodes, and bonus episodes as well. So, with that, I will just say until next time, I'll be seeing you and take care. Enjoy a good book. Happy reading and talk to you later.